House says all options are on the table following President Trump's warning that Syria could pay a big price in response to a chemical attack that killed dozens of civilians, including children. Let's go live to CNN's senior international correspondent, Fred Pleitgen, joining us from the Syrian capital of Damascus. Fred, is the Bashar al-Assad regime bracing for impact?
Well, Wolf, it certainly seems to be sinking in with them that the prospect of American military action here in Syria is quite real and could happen fairly soon. There are some telltale signs. It seems as though the Syrian military of Bashar al-Assad has been put on at least a heightened state of alert, and also there's reports of some airplane and troop movements. Now, some of the things that we've seen here in the Syrian capital is more military convoys than we're used to seeing. It's not clear whether or not that's directly related with the threat of an American retaliation, but it certainly does seem to be a telltale sign. Wolf, we've also managed to speak to a senior member of the Assad government for the first time about all this, and it's interesting to hear from them. On the one hand, they claim they're not afraid of American military action, but strangely, they've also, or it's not gone unnoticed here, that President Trump, at least in the medium term, wants to pull America's troops out. Here's what they had to say.
Of course not. If you can stop any child in Syria, any young person or woman, they won't be afraid. We weren't afraid. We won't be afraid, and we will never be afraid. But Trump's earlier tweet about American forces exiting Syria is a correct decision. We consider any foreign presence, without the approval and coordination of the Syrian state, to be occupation.
So the Syrians clearly don't believe, Wolf, that the Americans are in it for the long run here in this country. On the other hand, they are still quite not afraid, but certainly thinking ahead to if this military action could happen. The Syrians are now saying that they don't mind if international investigators were to come here to Damascus to go to that site where that chemical weapons attack allegedly happened, Wolf.
Would any U.S. military action, Fred, have any impact, let's say, on Russia's support for the Bashar al-Assad regime?
Well, look, I think that would really depend the scope of what America would be willing to do here in Syria, but it certainly doesn't seem likely that America would do anything that would deter the Russians from sticking by the side of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The Russians have shown that they are in it for the long run here. They have almost a permanent military base for their aircraft up there in Khmeimia near Latakia. They also have a port in Tartus, and they also have thousands of military and paramilitary personnel on the ground here. So it'd be very difficult to see that the Russians would give up also all of the gains that the Assad government has been able to make thanks to the Russians, first and foremost, of course, here around the Damascus area where that horrible attack happened, but then also in places like Aleppo as well. So the U.S. certainly would have to put a lot more chips on the table if it were to try and deter the Russians or try to get them to drop President Bashar al-Assad. Wolf.
We'll see what happens over the next few hours and days. Thanks very much, Fred Pleitgen, reporting for us from Damascus.